INCOterms are a set of standardized terms of trade which specifies the responsibility of the exporter and the responsibility of the importer in an international transaction. Okay? So in 1936, when international trade first started, and we have different languages, we have different cultures, we have different currencies, we have different governments. Okay? That's all they were, was a set standard shipping terms. So everybody throughout the world would know if we said X works, just by that term, they would know who's responsible for what, who's taking the risks. Doesn't tell you anything about cost. Doesn't tell you when title's going to transfer. Okay? The transfer of responsibility of the exporter never extends beyond the services for which that company has paid. There are several INCOterms, however, where the exporter is obligated to prepay a portion of the transportation costs, even though there is no longer responsibility for the goods. First of all, your buyer will always pay for transportation. One way or the other, you're always going to pay for the transportation. So remember that when you're quoting your product. Remember that when you're talking to your vendor. They're either going to prepay it and charge you back, or you're going to take the responsibility and take it on yourself. Your vendor or your customer will not take on that responsibility and take on that risk for free. They're going to upcharge you every time they handle any portion of the shipment. Everybody understand what I just said there? Okay. I love it when people tell me I ship X Works because it's so easy and so cheap for us because we don't need to worry about any international shipping. We're going to talk about that. Okay? Let's get back to just what X Works, or what the terms are. Can everybody agree with this statement? Most problems start with a misunderstanding. Okay? And it could be an internal misunderstanding. It could be buyers to sellers, sellers in their factory, buyer and seller and the carrier, exporters and their freight forwarder, importers and their customs brokers. It could be within your departments. Okay? Most problems start with a misunderstanding. I thought Jackie was handling this. Jackie thought I was handling it. And before you know it, we dropped the ball. Or Denise thought that Sandy was going to do something, and Sandy went on vacation and it didn't get done, and come to find out, it was Dana that was really supposed to handle it. You know? Now take that and stretch it across different companies, stretch it across different governments, modes of transportation, vendor and customer. Stretch that across your vendor, you, and your customer. Okay? So keep that in mind with every international transaction that you do. Most problems start with a misunderstanding. I wish I had a clicker. I wouldn't have to keep walking in a corner here, but okay, we talked about dues. INCOterms indicate each party's cost, risk, and obligation. They establish basic terms of transportation. Again, so it doesn't matter if I'm talking FOB, if I'm talking FCA, if I'm talking DDP to somebody in Germany, somebody in China, somebody in South America. If they're current on INCOterms, doesn't matter if we speak the same language or not, we understand who's responsible for what, who's taking risk at a certain place, who's going to be responsible to pay what bill. And we don't even have to speak the same language. Okay? INCOterms should be placed in the contract of sale. It should be placed on the bill of lading. And it should be placed on a commercial invoice. When you come up with a term that you are going to use, put it on every piece of documentation so that way there's no misunderstandings. INCOterms do not define contractual rights and obligations other than for delivery. And I hear sometimes, we agreed on a price and it's stated in the INCOterms. No, INCOterms will not tell you anything about pricing. Won't tell you how much you're going to pay for your product, how much you're going to pay for the steamship line, how much you're going to pay for the drayage. INCOterms does not tell you that. INCOterms might tell you that, Denise, you're responsible for the drayage, but it does not tell you how much you're going to pay for it. Okay? Does not determine how title to the goods will be transferred. So we don't get into the accounting portion of it. And it does not define the remedies for a breach of contract. Okay? Just remember, it's just a set of standard terms. That's all it is. It just helps you and I communicate so we know what I'm doing, what you're doing, when we're handing off the freight, who's going to be taking the risk, if there's any insurance that's going to be paid, who's paying it. And there's only two terms that define that, and we'll talk about that a little bit. Okay? Questions? Any questions on what INCOterms are, what they're not? Okay. You know, the other thing that I hope when we walk out of here today is that we walk out of here and we say, wow, I've heard INCOterms before, and I've never really understood them, but they're really not that difficult. And they're really not. All right? That's probably what I should have started out by just going through and saying, on a level of 1 to 10, 10 being I know them very well, 1 meaning I really don't understand them at all.